Zaria Bennett had mastered the art of looking invisible. At 22, she moved through the city like a shadow, unnoticed, unheard, surviving on calculations. How many days until eviction? How many coins left for transport? How long before her phone service vanished again? That morning the traffic light turned red, and something unusual happened. Black luxury car stopped. The rear door opened, and Damien Cross stepped out. Even if you'd never seen him in person, you knew who he was. The youngest billionaire in the city. Founder of Cross Dynamics. The kind of man whose decisions moved markets. He was mid-call, sharp voice, controlled anger. He didn't look down. But gravity did. A sealed black envelope slipped from his coat and landed near the curb. Near her feet. The wind nudged it once. Zaria stared at it. No one else noticed. The street was loud. Horns, vendors, engines, headlines. No one watching her. She bent down slowly. Inside. Not a few bills. Crisp. Life-altering. Her rent was overdue. Her bank account was frozen. Her final job interview had ended with, "We'll call you." They never called. Her fingers tightened around the envelope. She didn't need all of it. Just enough. Just enough to breathe again. Car door shut. The engine started. If she said nothing, no one would ever know. But integrity doesn't argue loudly. It whispers. And that whisper was stronger than survival. Zaria ran. She chased a car that didn't know she existed. She knocked against tinted glass. Security stepped out first. Suspicion came before gratitude. Hands reached for the envelope, and then for her wrist. "Where did you get this?" In less than 60 seconds, she went from invisible to accused. Upstairs, Damien Cross was informed that a woman from the street claimed to have found his money. He expected a thief. What he got was eye contact that didn't flinch. And a truth he couldn't buy. But what neither of them understood yet. Returning that envelope didn't just put her in his world. It placed her directly in the path of people who were already stealing far more than what fell at her feet. And unlike her, they had everything to lose. The light had just turned red when the black Aston Martin rolled to a stop. Zaria Bennett barely looked up at first. Cars like that didn't belong to her world. They passed through it. Glossy, distant, untouchable. She adjusted the strap of her worn leather bag and stepped back from the curb as the driver's door opened. The man who stepped out didn't look rushed. He looked controlled. Tailored charcoal suit. Clean lines. No wasted movement. He held his phone to his ear, voice low, calm, decisive. Damien Cross. Even if you didn't follow business headlines, you knew the name. A gust of wind swept down the avenue, sharp and sudden. Something slipped from his coat pocket, a thick black envelope, and skidded across the pavement. It stopped at her feet. For a second she didn't move. Traffic hummed. A horn blared somewhere behind. Damien turned slightly, still speaking into his phone, unaware. Zaria bent down. The envelope was unsealed. Stacks of it. Crisp. Bound tight. Her breath caught. It wasn't just money. It was rent paid. It was groceries. It was her phone turned back on. It was relief from the constant math in her head, subtracting bills from hope. No one saw. The driver was staring ahead. Damien's back was turned. The light was about to change. Her fingers tightened around the envelope. You don't get extra points for being honest. Life had taught her that much. The light flicked green. Damien moved toward the car. And in that split second, she saw two futures unfold. In one, she slipped the envelope into her bag, walked away, survived another month, maybe two. In the other, she ran toward a man who lived in a world that never noticed people like her. Her chest tightened. She hated that the choice hurt. "Hey!" she called out before she could change her mind. Damien paused, one hand on the car door, phone lowering slowly from his ear. She crossed the distance quickly, heels clicking against pavement, heart pounding harder with each step. Up close, he looked even more precise. Sharp eyes, unreadable expression. "You dropped this," she said, holding the envelope out. For a moment he didn't take it. His gaze shifted from the envelope to her face. Assessing. Calculating. Did I? His voice was calm. Neutral. It slid out when the wind picked up. He accepted it slowly, thumb pressing against the edge as if measuring its weight. There was no immediate gratitude. No relief. Just silence. You opened it, he said, not accusing. Just observing. It wasn't sealed. Another pause. The city moved around them, unaware that something invisible had shifted. Most people wouldn't return it, he said. Zaria met his eyes. Steady. Unapologetic. I'm not most people. Something flickered in his expression then. Not warmth. Not yet. Interest. The driver cleared his throat softly. Damien gave a single nod. What's your name? Zaria Bennett. He studied her a second longer, then reached into his coat and handed her a sleek business card. Ms. Bennett, he said evenly, you may have just made a very interesting decision. The car door closed. And as the Aston Martin disappeared into traffic, Zaria stood there with nothing in her hands, except the feeling that her life had just tilted. The building was all glass and silence. Zaria stood in the lobby of Cross Dynamics the next morning, Damien's card turning slowly between her fingers. She had almost not come. Almost convinced herself that men like him handed out business cards the way they handed out polite smiles, without intention. But curiosity was stronger than pride. The receptionist made a call the moment Zaria said her name. Within minutes, 2 security officers approached her. Not welcoming. Not hostile. Professional. Ms. Bennett, one of them said. Mr. Cross would like a word. They didn't take her to an office. They took her to a security suite. Monitors lined the walls. Camera feeds flickered. Hallways, elevators, parking levels. The air felt colder here. Damien stood near a long steel table, jacket off, sleeves rolled once at the wrist. Controlled as always. Thank you for coming, he said. She gave a small nod. You asked me to. His eyes held hers for a moment, then shifted to the envelope lying on the table between them. Do you know how much was inside? He asked. No. You didn't count it. No. Beat of silence. He gestured to the officer beside him. The man opened the envelope and removed the stacks of cash, laying them out carefully. $10,000, Damien said evenly. Every bill recorded. Zaria's spine straightened slightly. Recorded, she repeated. Marked. The second officer stepped forward with a scanner. One by one, he passed it over the edges of the bills. A soft beep followed each scan. Damien watched her, not the money. If a single bill was missing, he said calmly, it would register. The implication settled in the room. This wasn't gratitude. This was verification. Zaria felt heat rise in her chest. Not guilt, but insult. You thought I took some. I don't operate on thoughts, Damien replied. I operate on facts. The last bill was scanned. Another soft beep. The officer looked up. All accounted for. No missing numbers. No substituted notes. Silence stretched again, but this time it felt different. Damien studied her with sharper focus now. Not suspicion. Recalibration. You understand, he said, that most people would have taken at least one. I told you, she answered steadily. I'm not most people. Something unreadable moved behind his eyes. Respect, perhaps. Or strategy. Why return it, he asked. The question was quieter than the rest. Zaria hesitated. She could have said dignity. Could have said principle. Instead she told the truth. Because if I kept it, she said softly, I'd always know I stole it. No dramatics. No performance. Just fact. The room seemed to settle around her. Damien picked up the envelope and slid the cash back inside. Then he dismissed the security officers with a slight nod. When the door closed, the tension shifted again. You passed the test, he said. Zaria folded her arms lightly. I didn't know I was taking one. His expression almost softened. Everyone is, he replied. He walked to the window overlooking the city, then turned back toward her. Tell me, Ms. Bennett, he said evenly, are you currently employed? The question hung in the air. Measured, deliberate. Zaria felt it then. The envelope hadn't been the opportunity. Test was. Damien didn't rush decisions. Zaria noticed that quickly. The next morning, she was escorted not to a waiting area, but to a quiet corner office overlooking the city. Not the top floor, his floor, but high enough to feel removed from the noise below. He stood by the window when she entered, jacket on this time, cufflinks precise, as if yesterday's security room had never happened. Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. She did. A thin folder rested in front of him. He opened it calmly. I reviewed your academic record, he said. Your professors described you as meticulous, analytical, direct. She didn't ask how he got that information. I didn't finish, she replied. Temporary setbacks don't erase capability. The words were neutral, not sympathetic. He slid the folder across the desk. A 4-week contract. Audit support under operations. You'll review vendor payments, cross-check internal approvals, flag inconsistencies. She scanned the document quickly. The salary figure made her pause again, but she didn't react this time. You're hiring me because I returned money, she said. I'm hiring you, he corrected evenly, because you didn't touch money that wasn't yours. Distinction. And because, he continued, I prefer people who aren't already embedded in internal loyalties. There it was again. Something inside his company wasn't clean. And what happens in 4 weeks, she asked. If you perform well, we discuss extension. If I don't, you leave with a completed contract and a reference. No manipulation. No grand promises. Just structure. Zaria leaned back slightly. You understand people are going to talk. They already are. That didn't surprise her. Then don't treat me differently, she said. No protection. No favoritism. His gaze sharpened faintly. If you're here because you earned it. That will be clear. She studied him for a moment. Damien Cross didn't waste words. Didn't offer reassurance easily. But he also didn't seem like a man who made impulsive decisions. The envelope hadn't been impulsive. This wasn't either. She picked up the pen resting beside the contract. One condition, she said. He raised an eyebrow slightly. If I see something wrong, I report it directly to you. Not through layers. Was. Agreed. Sign. The sound of the pen against paper felt louder than it should have. When she handed the folder back, something shifted. Not dramatically, not emotionally. Strategically. Report to operations at 9, he said, standing. Badge access will be activated within the hour. She rose as well. At the door, he added. Ms. Bennett. He turned. Yesterday you made an honest decision. Beep. Today you made a calculated one. She held his gaze. I don't confuse the two. For the first time, the faintest hint of approval touched his expression. As she stepped into the corridor, contract in hand, Zaria felt it again, that subtle tilt in her world. For weeks. Temporary. But something told her this wasn't just a job. It was the beginning of being watched. By her 3rd day, Zaria understood something clearly. Cross dynamics was beautiful on the surface. Glass walls. Open workspaces. Quiet efficiency. People who moved with purpose and spoke in measured tones. But beneath it something pulsed. And it wasn't welcoming. Her temporary badge granted her access to operations and archived financial records. Nothing executive, nothing dramatic. Still, every time she walked through the glass doors, conversations dipped half a note lower. Not obvious. Subtle. Enough. She felt it in the way eyes lingered half a second too long. In the way introductions came with polite smiles that didn't reach anyone's eyes. Temporary hire, someone whispered near the coffee station. Straight from outside, another voice added. She pretended not to hear. Damien had been precise in his instructions. Document verification, cross-checking expense authorizations, flagging irregularities in vendor contracts. Tedious work. Detailed work. She liked that part. Numbers didn't lie. People did. Late Thursday afternoon, she noticed something odd. A cluster of transactions approved within minutes of each other. Different departments. Same authorization code. She leaned closer to the screen. That shouldn't happen. Her pulse ticked slightly faster, not fear. Instinct. Across the room she felt it again. When she looked up, a man in a navy suit near the glass conference room was already looking away. Too quickly. She made a note of the transaction IDs and continued working, steady. Professional. But the air felt heavier now. At lunch, no one sat at her table. That didn't bother her. What bothered her was the quiet. Not the comfortable kind. The observant kind. As she returned to her desk, her system briefly flickered. A login error flashed on her screen. Access denied. Her stomach tightened. She hadn't logged out. She tried again. Denied. A moment later, her access returned as if nothing had happened. Glitch, she told herself. But when she glanced toward IT, she saw two employees watching her monitor from across the floor. Not casually. Intently. That evening, as she packed her bag, the same man from the conference room approached her desk. Impeccable suit. Silver tie clip. "You're the new audit assistant," he said smoothly. "Temporary," she corrected. His smile didn't change. "Of course." His eyes dropped briefly to the files on her desk. "Careful not to read too deeply into internal structures," he added lightly. "Things can appear more complicated than they are." It wasn't advice. It was a warning. Zaria met his gaze calmly. "I'm only verifying what's in front of me." Another thin smile. "I'm sure you are." He walked away without introducing himself. As the elevator doors closed that night, Zaria stared at her reflection in the mirrored wall. She had stepped into a world of tailored suits and controlled voices. But control, she was beginning to realize, wasn't as solid as it looked. Someone inside this building didn't want her looking too closely. And now they knew she was. The first alert came at 7:42 a.m. Zaria hadn't even taken off her coat when her desk phone blinked red. "Operations," she answered. "Was." Then, "Ms. Bennett, could you come to IT for a moment?" The tone was polite. Too polite. She made her way down the corridor, heels quiet against polished floors. The glass walls reflected her in fragments, badge clipped neatly, posture straight, expression neutral. Inside the IT suite, two analysts stood beside a large monitor. On the screen was a digital access log. Her name sat at the top. Zaria Bennett. ID 47A09. Level 27. Executive Records. 6:13 a.m. Her pulse slowed instead of quickening. "That's not possible," she said calmly. "I wasn't in the building at 6. One of the analysts glanced at the other. "Your access card opened the door." "I still have it." She held it up. The second analyst zoomed in on the screen. Timestamp. Door ID. Clearance confirmation. Clean. Precise. Won't. "Can cards be duplicated?" she asked. A slight hesitation. "In theory. In practice." Silence. The door opened behind her. Damien stepped in without announcement. "What am I looking at?" he asked. The screen was rotated toward him. He read it once. Then again. "When were you issued your badge?" he asked her. 3 days ago." He turned to IT. "Any anomalies in system activity?" "We're checking." Zaria stepped closer to the monitor. "What's on level 27? "Executive Financial Archives." One analyst replied before he could stop himself. "Important enough to matter." Damien's eyes shifted to her. Not accusatory but assessing. "I didn't go there," she said evenly. "I wouldn't even know how to." "I know," he replied. Simple. Direct. The room went still. "Pull the security footage," he ordered. Minutes passed. Camera feeds loaded. Always. Elevators. The executive corridor at 6:13 a.m. The door to level 27 opened, but no one walked through it. The footage flickered. Static. Then normal again. Zaria felt it then, not fear but confirmation. Someone wasn't just watching her. Someone was positioning her. "That's not a glitch," she said quietly. "No," Damien agreed. He stepped closer to the screen, jaw tightening slightly. "Cross-check building entry logs," he instructed. "Anyone in before 7. "There's no record," IT replied. "Only executive clearance." Which meant someone with high-level authority. Zaria folded her arms lightly. "So my badge opens a door I've never seen. And the cameras blink at the exact moment it happens." She looked at Damien. "That's not random." His expression hardened, not toward her, but toward something deeper in the system he thought he controlled. "No," he said again. "It isn't." The implications settled in the room like smoke. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It was orchestration. Damien turned to IT. "Restrict all badge cloning capabilities immediately. Run a full system integrity scan." Quietly. Then his gaze returned to Zaria. "From this moment forward," he said evenly, "you report any irregularity directly to me." She held his eyes. "I already planned to." As she left the IT suite, she felt the shift again, but sharper this time. The envelope had opened a door. Now, something inside the building was trying to close it on her. The email arrived just before noon. Subject line: urgent. Authorization discrepancy. Zaria stared at the screen, a slow chill moving through her chest as she opened it. A transfer had been executed at 11:18 a.m. $280,000. Flagged vendor. Offshore routing. Authorized under her credentials. Her login. Her clearance. Her digital signature. For a moment, the office noise around her dulled into a distant hum. She hadn't approved anything that morning beyond routine cross-checks. Nothing remotely close to that figure. Her phone rang almost immediately. "Conference room B," a clipped voice said. "Now." When she stepped inside, the atmosphere felt different from IT. Less technical. More judicial. 3 department heads sat along one side of the table. Legal was present. Compliance. And at the head, Damien. He didn't look surprised. He looked contained. A large screen displayed the transaction record. Zaria Bennett. Authorization confirmed. "Would you like to explain this?" one of the executives asked, tone smooth but edged. Zaria didn't sit. "I didn't authorize that transfer." The man folded his hands. "Your login did. Then my login was used. Are you suggesting our internal security has been compromised twice in 1 week? I'm suggesting someone wants it to look like I compromised it." A subtle shift in the room. Another executive leaned forward. "You've had unusual access for a temporary employee." "Granted by Mr. Cross," she replied evenly. All eyes moved to Damien. He hadn't spoken yet. "Timestamp?" she asked. 11:18 a.m. She turned to Damien. "I was in your office at 11 reviewing the vendor reconciliation file." He nodded once. "You were." A flicker of discomfort crossed one of the executives' faces. "That doesn't eliminate the possibility of remote authorization," legal inserted. Zaria stepped closer to the screen. "Check the IP origin." Eddie, already dialed in remotely, responded through the speaker. Authorization came from an internal terminal. Floor 27. The same floor her badge had opened. Silence tightened the air. The executive with the silver tie clip, level 27 access, sat very still. "That's the executive archive floor," Zaria said quietly. "Yes," he replied smoothly. "Restricted. Like my badge was." His jaw shifted almost imperceptibly. The compliance officer cleared her throat. "Until this is resolved, protocol requires suspension of system access." There it was. Formal. Clean. Damien finally spoke. No. The single word cut through the room. This investigation is not concluded, he continued calmly. Access is restricted to monitored review only. She remains under internal supervision. Not protection. Not absolution. But not condemnation either. The executives exchanged looks. The meeting dissolved into procedural language after that. Containment, audit expansion, reputational risk. Zaria felt every glance as she walked out. Not curious now. Certain. Accusing. By the time she reached the elevator, whispers had already begun. Fraud. Cider. Mistake. The doors slid shut, sealing her inside mirrored walls. 2 incidents. Same floor. Her credentials. Too precise to be coincidence. Someone wasn't just watching anymore. Someone was escalating. And this time, they had given her a number large enough to destroy her. The board convened before sunset. Zaria wasn't invited, but she felt the shift ripple through the building anyway. Doors closed. Assistants moved quickly. Legal stayed close to elevators. The atmosphere tightened into something corporate and sharp. Fraud at that level wasn't small. It was combustible. She remained at her desk under restricted access, every click monitored. Suspension without the name. Isolation without the announcement. At 6:12 p.m., her phone lit up. Come upstairs, Damien's voice said. No explanation. The executive floor was quieter than the rest of the building. Carpet softer. Or colder. When she stepped into his office, the skyline behind him was turning gold, then gray. They want you terminated, he said without preamble. She didn't react outwardly. Of course they do. The transfer triggered an automated alert with 2 external investors. They're demanding immediate containment. Containment, she repeated. Meaning me. He watched her carefully. Meaning a public statement, internal correction, and assurance the breach was limited. And firing the temporary employee solves that. Yes. There was no cruelty in the word. Just reality. She stepped further into the room. So why am I still here? Damien moved away from the window, slow and deliberate. Because the transfer originated from level 27 again, he said. And because the IP routing pattern matches a shadow server I've suspected for months. She held his gaze. You think someone inside is laundering through vendor chains? I don't think, he replied. I verify. But verifying me is easier. Faint pause. Yes, honest. That surprised her more than anything. He walked to his desk and placed a thin tablet in front of her. If I push for a full forensic audit, investors will assume systemic instability. Stock dips. Media interest. Internal panic. And if you don't, the narrative remains simple. Temporary hire exploited limited access. She absorbed that. So this is your choice, she said quietly. It is. Outside the glass walls, the city lights flickered on one by one. Why risk it, she asked. His answer came without hesitation. Because the numbers don't align with you. Not sentimental. Not protective. Analytical. But firm. She studied him for a moment. You realize if you're wrong, you lose more than money. I'm aware. And if you're right, then the problem is far more expensive than $280,000. Silence settled between them, not tense but weighted. Full forensic audit, he said finally, as if deciding aloud. Independent cybersecurity firm. Quiet engagement. No board vote. Her pulse steadied. That will anger them. Yes. And if they force you to reverse course. They won't. Confidence, not arrogance. Calculation. He picked up his phone and dialed. Initiate Tier 4 review, he instructed calmly. Effective immediately. When he ended the call, he looked at her. This will escalate, he said. It already has. A flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed his expression. No, he corrected softly. Now it becomes deliberate. Zaria understood what that meant. He had chosen to pull the thread. And threads, in places like this, were always attached to something bigger. The forensic report took 5 days. 5 days of silence stretched thin across the company like glass ready to crack. Zaria worked under supervision, every keystroke logged. No one spoke to her unless necessary. The whispers had evolved into certainty. Guilty. Temporary mistake. Naive hire. On the 6th morning, Damien called an emergency board session. This time she was invited. The boardroom was long, polished, immaculate. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, but no one looked outside. Screens glowed along the walls, waiting. The executive with a silver tie clip sat 3 seats from the head of the table, posture relaxed, expression unreadable. Damien stood rather than sat. Tier 4 forensic audit is complete, he began evenly. A subtle shift moved through the room. He tapped the control panel. The first slide appeared. Server routing maps, timestamps, mirrored credentials. The unauthorized transfer did not originate from Ms. Bennett's terminal, he continued. It originated from a shadow node embedded within Level 27's executive subnet. Murmurs. The silver tie clip executive remained still. The next slide showed access overlays. Badge duplication timestamps. Camera interference points. Someone with senior clearance, Damien said calmly, authorized duplicate credentials and rerouted transactions through offshore vendors tied to a shell consultancy. A name appeared on the screen. Not Zaria's. Gasps broke the controlled silence. The consultancy traced back through layered ownership structures, each one peeling away like thin paper, until a final beneficiary file opened. The silver tie clip executive's face stared back from the profile image. For the first time his composure cracked. This is circumstantial, he said sharply. Digital manipulation is possible. Damien didn't raise his voice. It is, he agreed. Which is why the independent firm mirrored your private access drive. Another slide. Encrypted folders. Personal authorization keys. Matching signature patterns. The compliance officer's face drained of color. You accessed the shadow server 23 times in the last quarter, Damien said. Including at 6:13 a.m. the morning Ms. Bennett's badge was cloned. Silence collapsed into something heavier. You're making a mistake, the executive snapped. You have no idea what you're disrupting. Damien's gaze hardened slightly. On the contrary. The boardroom doors opened. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, accompanied by corporate legal. The executive pushed back from the table. This isn't over. No, Damien replied evenly. It isn't. The officers approached, reading formal charges. Fraud, embezzlement, digital tampering. The sound felt clinical against the thick air. As he was escorted past Zaria, the executive's eyes flicked toward her. Not anger. Calculation interrupted. Then he was gone. The doors closed. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, the compliance officer exhaled. The investors will receive a full transparency report, Damien answered. Today. The board members avoided Zaria's gaze now. Not accusatory. Reevaluating. Damien turned toward her. In light of the findings, he said clearly, all allegations against Ms. Bennett are formally withdrawn. It wasn't applause. It wasn't warmth. But it was recognition. Zaria stood there, steady, absorbing the shift. A week ago she had been invisible. Now she had exposed something rotten at the highest level. And in rooms like this, exposure changed power. Not quietly. Permanently. The press release went live at 9 a.m. Clear. Precise. Unambiguous. Cross Dynamics announced the discovery of internal executive fraud, the termination and arrest of the responsible party, and the complete exoneration of a temporary audit associate whose credentials had been manipulated without her knowledge. Her name was written in full. Zaria Bennett. By noon, the financial news cycle had shifted from speculation to praise. Swift action, decisive leadership, corporate transparency. Investors stabilized. The market corrected. Inside the building, the air felt different. People looked at her now. Not with suspicion. With awareness. Some offered quiet apologies. Others avoided her entirely, recalculating past assumptions. The whispers had changed direction. Resilient. Unlucky but not weak. She didn't linger in any of it. Recognition wasn't what steadied her. Truth was. Late afternoon, she stood once more in Damien's office. The skyline beyond the glass looked the same as it had the day she first walked in. But she didn't feel the same. "You handled yourself well," he said. "So did you," she replied. Slight nod. Professional acknowledgement. He slid a document across the desk. Not a temporary contract this time. Formal offer. Strategic risk and compliance analyst. Full-time. Structured salary. Benefits. Tuition reimbursement to complete her degree. She read every line carefully. "No probation clause?" she asked lightly. A faint shift at the corner of his mouth. "You've already passed it." Silence settled. Not tense, not heavy. Earned. "You understand," he continued. "This role won't be quiet. You'll review executive structures, vendor chains, internal controls." "I wouldn't want quiet," she said. "I assumed." She placed the document down but didn't sign immediately. "A week ago," she said slowly, "I was deciding whether to keep an envelope." "And today?" he asked. "Today I'm deciding who I become in this building." That seemed to matter more than the job itself. Damien studied her with that same measured precision, but something else sat beneath it now. Respect. "You weren't hired because you returned money," he said. "You're here because when pressure escalated, you didn't fold." She absorbed that. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt positioned. Design. The sound of pen on paper was quieter than the first time, but more certain. When she stood to leave, Damien added, "Ms. Bennett." He paused. "One honest decision can alter direction," he said evenly. "But sustained integrity rewrites trajectory." Outside, the city moved as it always had. Fast, indifferent, relentless. But as Zaria stepped into the corridor, badge updated, contract secured, she no longer felt like she was chasing stability from the outside. She had walked into power, faced it, and reshaped her place within it. The envelope had fallen at her feet. But it wasn't the money that changed her life. It was the choice. And the strength to stand by it.